Hello again and welcome to another bearing removal and installation video featuring Boca bearings. Now today's engine topic is one that I've never replaced bearings in before. I've had several that I've run on the channel, but I've never actually replaced bearings in it, and it is a large two-stroke engine. In fact, it is a Super Tigre S3000 engine. So let's go straight to the table and see what kind of unique characteristics this engine might have. Okay, so here on the table I've got parts of this Super Tigre S3000 engine. You can just see how large this engine is. Now obviously I only brought this up here just because I wanted to show how large it is and how cool this engine really is. Now this portion of the engine has already been through the ultrasonic cleaner. This portion has not. So that's kind of what I wanted to also show, is how much better it's going to look once this thing is cleaned up. So let me just put this off to the side here. And here is the front housing of this engine, and as you may have already seen, something rather interesting about this one, in that it's not going to take any effort at all to get this crankshaft out. And I don't really understand why. It just, I pulled it apart and touched it and it's coming apart just like that. So as standard, let me just explain the tools I've got to take this apart, and we'll go from there. In fact, one I did not put on here. So that is right here. I've got my piece of wood, but man, I've been saying this for the last few videos, I really just need to go out to the home what do you call them, home supply store and get a new piece of wood, because this one's just really beat up, and every time I hit it now it's starting to throw wood shards everywhere. But I've got that to pound out the bearing that I don't need to pound out, or the crankshaft, because it's already free. My hammer, flat nose punch, which I will definitely need for the front bearing. And then of course this here is a bearing puller, which is part of the Boca bearing miniature bearing puller set. And because I already knew that this was going to pull out just like that, I was like, oh well, how am I going to get that rear bearing out? Well, I'm going to need to employ using this and this short socket stub. So one of the things I kind of alluded to in the intro was that there's some interesting characteristics of this engine. So let me just go ahead and pull that apart. So one of the main interesting characteristics, again with another Super Tigre engine, is that it has this little washer on here, or spacer I should say. So that's one of those things that when you take these things apart, you want to make sure that you do not lose that at all. That would not be a good thing. In fact, I don't even know. I'll probably take this off because I'm going to go down and hit this with the brass wheel on my grinder and clean this thing up. But the other part about this was that when I pulled it out the first time, I noticed that it's got full webbing around. It's got the cutouts for the counterweight, but yet it's fully webbed, which could have posed a real issue trying to get this rear bearing off had the bearing come off and been stuck on the crankshaft, which in this instance, fortunately, that's not the case. So the other thing that I noticed that was interesting is I was looking at the front nose of this thing. I was like, that doesn't look like a bearing. And it's not. What you're seeing here is there's another little bushing. And this is a rubber seal. If I can use that punch to get that out. This is a rubber seal. And our bearing resides deep within here, which I thought was interesting too, because at first I was like, wow, it's a big rubber sealed bearing, but it's not a rubber sealed bearing at all. It is just simply a rubber seal that protects this bearing. So what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to heat this up and punch this front bearing out, and then I'm going to affix this tool to this thing. And because this tool is designed with a screw-in or threaded-in portion here, it's actually designed to just use for bearings that are not press-fit into anything that you just can't reach. So you would put it in there and you just gently pull them out. Well, you can't just gently pull this thing out, I can guarantee you that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat it up, get this lodged in there, locked in place, and then I'm going to use this socket. And hopefully I'll be able to hold this thing at the same time and tap this bearing out like that. So that's the plan. Let's see how well that plan gets executed. I'm going to go ahead and remove this crankshaft off to the side. I don't think I need this. I don't need these parts in my way either. And the other thing is I've got a brand new glove. Instead of having that other glove, Now I've got this big welder's glove that a buddy of mine, Harvey, turned me on to, and I'm going to give it a shot and see how it works. So we're going to use this to heat this, at least the front portion of this up, so I can get this front bearing out. I may end up reheating the back end once I get the other bearing puller tool in place, because I think it'll be easier to work with once it's a little bit cooler. So hopefully this isn't going to take too much heat just to get this front bearing out. In fact, let's see if this thing is so large it sinks a lot of heat. So let's just see if I can just tap this bearing out here. Yeah. Okay, so that bearing just came right out very easily. So there's our front bearing. It's not shielded or sealed on either side. So now, this isn't too hot. I think I can work with that. I need to grab, I think I intended to get a larger wrench as opposed to using channel locks to hold this thing, but I didn't, so that's what we're going to use. So what I'm going to do here is no tension on this whatsoever. I'm just going to stick this bearing in here and get in that groove that there's a little bit of a gap, slight gap between where the bearing inner race is and the crankcase, and now I'm just going to start turning this in here. But I can't really do that by hand because this really takes some effort to do. And of course this isn't set to the right size yet either, so let's open that up. Now I'll just start cranking on this and really expand those jaws. Okay, so it's locked in place. So now what I'm going to do is, I hope I don't think there's any oil in there. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to probably just hold this guy here like that and heat this up tremendously, and then see how successful I am in doing one of these numbers with it, because this end of this socket extension is just the right size to tap that, and it looks like I got just enough tapping zone to get this out. So this is going to be rather interesting to see how this works. So let's just heat this thing up, and I'll probably time lapse this or just cut some of this out because this is a big chunk of aluminum and it's going to need a lot of heat, I think. Let's see if that was, it's pretty warm. Pretty warm, and I'm just going to set that there. And there you go. There's the bearing extracted beautifully off of there. So now what I'm going to do is grasp this. I don't think this thing is hot at all. No, this thing didn't grab any heat at all. In fact, the bearing is a little warm, but not nearly so much as that outer housing. Now I can just release this tension on that bearing, and that bearing should just come right off. And it is rather warm. So there we go. Now I'm going to clean up this portion of the housing and come back and do what appears to be a very, very simple bearing installation. Okay, so here I've got the cleaned up crankshaft, cleaned up front housing, and the seals I took out, and the old bearings, the new set of bearings here, and all the other items I need to do this very simple installation. So the first thing I'm going to do here before I talk about the bearings is I'm going to lubricate all of these parts, and I always use Boca's Lightning Lube Road Power for doing this, and I've been doing a lot of this stuff, so I'll just put a pump in my little glass jar here, set that off to the side, and go ahead and start lubricating up this really huge crankshaft. Make sure that we've got good lubrication there and on the front housing where these bearings are going to reside. So now that that is done, I'm going to leave that there for a moment and pull these bearings out because I want to lube those bearings up also. So this bearing kit for the Super Tiger S3000 is ENK-109 kit. Kit number ENK-109. So let's open this up and see. It looks like the front bearing in this particular kit, it looks like the front and rear bearing in this particular kit come with steel shields, ZZ type bearings, which means I'll be removing the shields on both of these bearings. That one, top of that bag gave way instead of opening. So let's just take that out. Boy, that is just a massive bearing. It's a 6004. This one is not quite so massive. This is a 6000, it looks like. So let me get my small flathead screwdriver here and just go in the inner race here real quick and push in and lift up and get these shields off. Sometimes that's easier said than done here. There we go. Yeah, so these are nice and greased up on the inside. Now I'm going to be copying exactly what this was, which was both shields are complete, or bearings are completely open. This one's really looking rough. It feels really rough also. So let's just go ahead and get, I don't think I've ever removed a shield on a bearing this size before. Maybe I have. There you go. Boy, boy, look at the difference between those two bearings. That's just unbelievable. So I think we don't need these over here anymore. I've shown all the fun stuff there. Let's just get this off of here and do another little bit of lubrication here on both sides. Everything here on the outside of this bearing. So let's see if this bearing, because I always install these on the crankshaft first, just like that. Boy, that's beautiful. And I do that because when I install the front bearing, which is what's going to go in first, that allows me to use that as a centering mechanism, although it's not as important in this instance with a two-piece crankcase, but it is still going to allow this rear bearing to go in there in a more straight fashion. So what I'm going to do here is, knowing that this bearing is going to have to be recessed and not flushed, I didn't have a socket or anything exactly the same size, so I'll probably just use this old bearing and put it on top, and then put this piece of wood on there and tap it into place just like that. So I'm going to keep that handy. I'm going to move this off to the side, and I'm going to heat this guy up just a little bit so that we can get this front bearing installed. Actually, I'm having kind of second thoughts about using that second bearing like that now. I don't want to have two bearings stuck in the front of this. So I think I'm just going to use the end of that piece of wood. Hopefully that's warm enough to do this. So I'm going to just set this in place, tap this on here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just the corner of this piece of block here and kind of drive that home that way, because I think that's fully seated. It's not gonna. Looks like that seal is flush. I don't know that I can tell. Yeah, it looks like that's fully seated in there now. So that's good. I guess maybe I could have used that and that still would have come out all right. I just didn't want this bearing to get stuck in here like it just did. Now I got kind of an issue here. There we go. So there we go. That bearing is fully seated. This is not all that warm, But the other thing with this is this crankshaft is so long that I'm going to have to hold it like this and just tap right on the counterweight here like this, because, well, it already started to go in there like that. Ugh. I'm going to heat this up just like that, because there's no way that this is going to stand up in my vise like that. So this is presenting all kinds of interesting issues here. Wait, before I do that, I'm going to slather a little bit of this oil around the edge again, just to make sure. And then I'll heat this, try to heat this up without hitting that bearing. See if I got enough there, enough heat in this thing to do that. And again, you can hear that last final tap. Now, ordinarily I wouldn't be tapping on the crankshaft like that, but this is a hardened steel part, and it gave me enough room to do that safely. I mean, because would have been very difficult for me to try and hold this thing and hold a awl or a drive and do that. So I feel very comfortable with that. And then of course, look, this thing still wants to just come in and out like that. So there you have it. Now the final step of this would be just putting this seal on here. Oops, you know what I didn't do? Shoot. Is I didn't put this spacer on here. So that's an issue. We're going to have to see if I can get that front bearing out now very quickly. Because this is not going to allow us to do it like that. Because this bearing, this spacer is supposed to go in here. Well, look at that. Went right in place there. So now I'm just going to get right on this, on both the races here, and just going to tap that down into place. Wow, that was a learning experience there. So I can fully seat this bearing just like this. This has been a different sort of installation for sure. Okay, that's fully seated. That's very interesting. So now what I can do is I can put this metal collar that resides within this rubber seal here. Probably do that and just slide that thing in place. And there you have it. Wow, that was definitely a new learning experience and quite fun. And there we go. Now this bearing installation is complete, and I can go ahead and reassemble this engine for its new owner.